So I am now joined by a very special guest, former Orioles starting pitcher Steve Johnson. Steve, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
So I want to start with the work that you're doing, the post-career with Optimal Baseball Performance. You're training fellow pitchers. How did you get into this business, and how did you know you wanted to train people?
Yeah, well, we're actually training pitchers and hitters, which a lot of people don't, they see me as a pitcher, but it's one of those things where the things we're doing with the way the body works is is kind of works for both hitting and pitching, and you're just basically trying to get the body to work together and get all the use your legs and core and get all the energy flowing all the way through. And it's just some of the things I learned through the end of my career, and some of the things that I think I just wanted to coach in some way, but I didn't want to go into the pro atmosphere again. I don't think, at least right now. I wanted to be around home and just kind of enjoy being home for a while and be around my family and friends. And it's been fun being able to do that, and then also help kids along the way and give them an opportunity to get some tools and some information that I wasn't able to have at a young age, and be able to provide that for them and help them in their young careers.
It's really cool. I was doing some reading about this. I saw you're working with people. It's age is 8 to pro, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what are some of the general principles you try to impart, or what are some of the things you learned in your career that you can help, teach some of the younger generation about?
Well, a lot of times we try and teach these kids, especially at a young age, to perform movements that they're not physically able to perform. So what we try and do is we screen them and see what kind of limitations they have, and then kind of use that information to go from there, and just kind of establish maybe they're not flexible enough to get their arm up. And as a coach, yelling at a kid to get his arm up when he can't physically do it is not helping him, and it's not making you a better coach. So that's kind of what we try and establish first with all our guys. And you'd be surprised how some of the younger guys are more flexible and in better position to perform movements that some of the older guys aren't able to do yet. And and vice versa. Obviously, with the talent wise, the younger guys have a long way to go. But to be able to get some of that information early on and kind of maybe eliminate some of those limitations that our bodies just naturally have, from person to person. That way, it kind of makes it more individualized, and that other people are working on different things. And yeah, sure, there's things that everyone can work on at the same time, but being able to individualize those approaches from an 8 or 9-year-old, and obviously you're not going to make an 8 or 9-year-old do everything that an 18-year-old would be ready to do, but you can actually prepare them for some things that the 18-year-olds getting a late start at, or 17-year-old, and guys that before they get into high school, they're kind of maybe eliminating some of those factors that could cause some problems later on. And then you can start earlier with maybe some more explosive movements and stuff, and things that everyone wants to do, but they don't have the foundation to do right away.
When you said, get your arm up, I immediately had flashbacks to high school baseball and little league, because that's all I ever heard. I wasn't a pitcher, but that's all the coaches would yell as they wanted the kids to come over the top. If you're working with somebody and they have kind of a proclivity to kind of go sidearm or 3/4, do you work with them to try to make sure that they're as successful doing that, just the same way that they would be successful going straight up over the top?
Yeah, so we don't really want to change too much about each person. I mean, usually the way you start throwing is their natural way to throw. I mean, there's some things where you may change some things to try and get them in a better position, but for the most part, there's a bunch of ways to throw. There's a bunch of ways to hit, and we really just try and get the best, I guess, stable base for them to perform their movements. And then also, if their arm's in a bad spot, we maybe get their arm going a little faster rather than changing the angle. So there's a bunch of things we can do, but it's all designed on how their energy flow is going. I mean, that's the thing. We have a 3D motion device in the K-Vest, and we kind of put them on, and some guy that you think looks like a perfect delivery, and all of a sudden they're completely out of sequence. So it's one of those things where you don't know until you put it in there, and then you get the information, and then you use the assessment with the 3D motion, and you really try and get them in a better position. But we don't want to change who they are. So that's I don't want to make them pitch like me. I want to make them pitch like them and get them in a better spot.
That's great. So you mentioned some of the technology that you're working with over there. I read that you're doing work with high tech cameras and all sorts of imagery. Was that something that helped you in your career? Was some of the stuff that you're doing now, or did you kind of pick it up later on?
It's some of the things that weren't really available near the end. I mean, they're starting to be a little bit more involved in things like that. The K vest is something that they tried to do with the biomechanics and everything. It was kind of around, but it wasn't being put into something that we could really understand. That was the problem with that. But the cameras and stuff, we just kind of do slow-mo right now in like the iPhone and iPad. I eventually will get something more a little high tech, like some of these places have, and more established that I get, which will help in different ways. But really, I mean, that's just seeing their delivery in slow-mo, being able to slow it down and kind of show them in different positions where we were trying to get to, and things that they've made improvements on, and just show them some bad spots that they're trying to get into. That can just help in general. I mean, the cameras, I just remember setting up the camcorder when I first started. I mean, it's so hard to get slow-mo video and then trying to slow it down when I was like, 17, 18. It's become so much better in getting that info right away. And that, you don't really need the high-tech stuff. The high-tech stuff's in our hands and in our pockets already. So they're fortunate in that way. But yeah, I wish some of this would be a little bit more available when I started playing, for sure.
So I've heard a lot about some of the other outfits, Driveline up in Washington State. I've really only heard of that through the context of Trevor Bauer and some of the work that he's doing in his off season. Like, how similar or different is to like what you're doing now to like what those guys are doing?
I would say that they're probably a little bit more advanced right now in what we're doing. They've been going on for a pretty long time, and we're using some of the same things, maybe toning it down a little bit. Whereas I guess we have a more approach to say, yeah, we're going to try and get some power out of you, but we're going to really try and establish that foundation first. And sometimes when those places are doing their thing, some of that can maybe get overlooked in a way where people are like, hey, you got to come here established. You got to come here with the foundation, and we'll give you the stuff and we'll go on from there. But a lot of kids, they may, and they'll do all the assessments that we do for sure, and probably a little bit more. But for right now, for what we're doing, we're going to kind of continue to grow and continue to get better at what we're doing, and really take the data that we're using, and it's similar stuff, but I think they're a little more high tech than we are right now. But that, like I said, they've been going at it for a while, and yes, we use some weighted balls just like they do. I think they do a little bit more than we do, but we're also, for the weighted balls, we're really trying to strengthen the shoulder. And I think when they first started the weighted balls, it was more for shoulder strength. When Tom House and actually the people that I started training with near the end of my career is actually named Steve Johnson, down in Northern Virginia in advanced baseball, and they were working together with the weighted balls. They were basically just trying to find a strength and health reason for the weighted balls, and then all of a sudden they found a way to get more velocity, or that it kind of was an accident to where they were working with the weighted balls, trying to do some holds and throws and stuff, and then all of a sudden they found a routine, and all the guys started bumping up in velocity. So it was kind of just an accident that they found that the weighted balls do that. But weighted balls have been around for a while in that. We threw wiffle balls and the overload and underload. You throw waterlogged balls for a while, and then all of a sudden you throw a wiffle ball. And we were already doing that at a young age. We just didn't realize that we were doing it. Now they just found a routine to kind of have a more structure to it. So it's good, and the way we do it is nice, and we're just trying to do the best we can with it.
You brought up the weighted ball stuff. Like, I've only heard it in the context of, Zach Britton, the work that he did with it, where he was able to add something crazy to his miles per hour, like 3 or 4 miles per hour to his pitches. Is that kind of typical for that work doing with the weighted ball, or is it kind of like, unique situations?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's tough. Everyone's different. You kind of, I mean, when Zach first came up to the big leagues, he was hitting 95, 97. A lot of people forget about that because he hurt his shoulder, and then he dropped down into the 90s a little bit, lower 90s, and then obviously high 80s, low 90s, and also becoming a reliever full time kind of helps you get that more consistent bump. But I think what really helped Zach was, he did a combination with the weighted balls, along with he got healthy, and then he stopped starting a little bit, and then you have that more momentum and more stamina and power. So I think the combination of that stuff helps. But I think when we're born with a certain max velocity that we're just born to throw. And some guys can reach that max potential, and some guys can't. Some guys have a whole lot more in the tank, and others have as much as they have, and they only get up to 88. So we're basically trying to say, hey, with the weighted balls, we're gonna do what we can. We're gonna establish the rest of the body, get our body moving a little quicker. Work with the weighted balls to help strengthen our shoulder as well, and then hopefully reach our max potential, which most guys don't come close to. So if we can kind of minimize that gap from their max potential to, where they are, and just slowly kind of get up as high as we can go, that's kind of the goal. And some guys can do it, and other guys just either they may not put in the work to do it, or they just might not have the talent to get there. And that's okay. It's just, in high school, especially or young guys, you just want them to be healthy. And that's really what we're trying to establish.
I want to go back to Trevor Bauer for a second. That guy just fascinates me. Like every part about like how transparent he is with his behind the scenes stuff and how like outspoken he is about pitching. The big thing with him is spin rate. That's all I hear about. It's kind of a buzzword. His spin rate obviously jumped crazy high and he was able to win the Cy Young. Like how much of an emphasis do you place on spin rate with the work you're doing now? And like how big of a phenomenon was it when you were pitching?
I don't fully understand it right now. I mean, I was told that I knew I had a higher spin rate than most for my velocity. I got a lot of high or swings high in the zone, and I just had a deceptive fastball that they called an invisible. I was able to throw high in the zone at 87 to 90, and I got strikeouts. And people looked at me like I was crazy, but I just found that worked at a young age, and I didn't know anything about spin rate. But then I found out that I had a little bit higher spin rate than most, and that was the reason why my ball was able to stay a little higher, which kind of looked like it was rising, which it really wasn't. It was just kind of staying on the same plane, whereas all the guys it comes more on a downward angle. And I was never able to kind of feel or figure out how to make it higher. I just threw the ball the way I always threw it. And that's kind of how it was. And I know that, Trevor's way more, I mean, he studies that stuff and has been studying it before he even got into college, I think. So he's way more knowledgeable and stuff like that, and probably found a way and probably knows certain things to do and techniques to try and get a little higher spin rate. Was to the point to where I was like trying to add spin rate. I was always just trying to hone in where I was throwing it, which was always a fun time. Cause I just, I was trying to throw strikes and then be able to throw my high fastball to get guys out. But, doing that at 88 to 90 was a little tougher than his 95, I think. So he's been impressive though. He's kind of made a name for himself in that he's been able to do things that a lot of guys haven't been able to kind of make the adjustments like he has.
Are there things like that in pitching that are kind of, I don't want to call them fads, but like, like the flavor of the day? Cause I feel like everybody's talking about spin rate, I guess like velocity. Are there other things that kind of pop up like this in the pitching world that, take the world by storm?
Well, I think it's tough because everyone wants velocity. Everyone wants to throw hard. That's just like everyone wants to hit homers and wants the high, exit speeds in the hitting and all that stuff. And those are popular things. But they're not the end all be all. I mean, there's that extra little bit of, hey, can this guy get anybody out? I know he throws 95, but what's good is it if he can't throw a strike? Or, some 95s are really easy to hit. Whereas, a guy like me out of 88 to 90, and sure, some days I was easier to hit, but for the most part, I got a lot of strikeouts in my career. So I had an average fastball that got strikeouts, and there's guys that have a 95 to 97 that don't get any strikeouts. So there's different things that are to the naked eye, may not see anything, but there's other ways to kind of see results and to see talent and all those things. So I'm a little worried that we're geared towards there's more walks than there's ever been. Yeah, there's more strikeouts and guys are throwing harder than they've ever been, but it worries me that we're kind of going into, let's see how hard I can throw and not worried about, hey, can I get this guy out in 3 pitches if I can? And it's tough because colleges and high schools are all looking for the radar gun. And, these kids are being brought up in this radar gun type thing. 10-year-old people are, dealing with parents now. It's like, hey, my kid's throwing this at 10. I'm like, I don't care. I don't even know what they're supposed to be throwing at 10. It doesn't really matter. It shouldn't really matter at that point because kids grow at different ages and stuff. I think sometimes, I mean, hopefully there's a little bit going to be maybe a correction in a way to where we get more towards, hey, we're not trying to throw it as hard as we can, maybe every time. Maybe tone it back a little bit. If you can throw 97, that's great. Have it in your back pocket for when you need it. But maybe tone it back to like 94. That's still okay. And even the guys that can't get that high, maybe just tone it back a little bit and maybe throw a better pitch rather than, just rearing back and throwing it and walking everybody and getting yourself in those positions. Because I've tried to throw strikes and I still had trouble walking guys. So, that's kind of where we are right now. Where strikeouts are rising, velocity's rising, but more guys are getting put on base free, and that's kind of where pitchers we want to eliminate that if we can.
What do you think has contributed more to, like, the overall trend of velocity, velocity, velocity? Do you think it is like the trend in the youth baseball community of playing year-round baseball? Because kids now are playing travel ball, they're playing baseball throughout the year. They're not mixing it up with other sports. And also, I think just like the general ease and availability of like Tommy John and shoulder surgeries. Like, do you think those two things have kind of contributed to like this whole we have to throw hard?
I just think it's what everyone wants to see. You want to light up the radar gun. You want to throw hard, and when colleges and high schools and summer teams put emphasis on you have to throw this hard or you can't pitch for us, that's basically you're making it need to happen. And then when the guys who throw 95 to 97 and 100, which is it's not easy to do. Not everyone's able to do it. More guys are doing it, but people are like, oh, we'll just mold that guy into a better pitcher. But he has talent that the other guy might not ever get to, and that's just it's hard to say no to, because it's talent you can't create. Some guys can get up there. You have guys that jump 10 mile an hour all of a sudden, or 7 mile an hour, where they're throwing 90 in high school and then they get to the big leagues or wherever, or they learn something or figure something out or grow and they throw in 95 to 97. Sure, that happens. But I think it's the money too. I mean, you throw 95 in high school and you do have pretty well. I mean, you're making $2 million out of high school. Whereas a guy who threw 90 he has to work a little harder to do that. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to play the game. You have to give them what they want, but we also have to kind of teach the correct things. And you have parents and stuff who are asking to possibly get Tommy John early,
Yeah.
and then so that they can maybe throw harder. And you ask people, like, why people throw harder sometimes after Tommy John? Because they spend a year not being able to throw, and all they do is strengthen for a year. They strengthen their shoulder and they build it back up, and they do things that they've never done before. I think if more people just did the Tommy John recovery routine at 12, 13, 14, 15, they'd do fine. Their shoulder would be stronger than ever, and they'd probably throw harder. But people don't want to put in that effort. They want to. I don't know. It doesn't make sense too often, but you got to put in work to keep your shoulder healthy and also have a good delivery. So there's a lot that goes into it, but we have to, as coaches, you want to build up their velocities as much as they can, because that's kind of what the colleges are doing. But you also want to do it in the right way, and that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. So I want to shift gears. I want to talk about your career journey and how you got to the big leagues. Your dad is a former major league pitcher himself, Dave Johnson. Like, how important was it having him as a resource when you're growing up? How did that impact your development?
I mean, I believe that my dad being there for me the whole way through was the most important thing. I mean, having him as a coach growing up, he pretty much stopped playing by the time I started playing baseball. I mean, it was right along. I think I had played like maybe one season, and he was with the Tigers at the time, and he was like, okay, I'm away, and I don't want to be away, and I don't want to miss all this. So, I mean, he pretty much ended right when I started playing. So he was always around, just showing me not only the mechanics and everything that I learned, but also the mental side of the game. And especially going through high school, having that was great, sure. But just having a dad that actually went through the exact same process of minor leagues into the majors and grinded his way through, and got to the big leagues, was kind of up and down, and then got there and wasn't really a prospect, but kind of just grinded through everything that I grinded through. I mean, being able to rely on him for pretty much everything that happened to me was something a lot of people don't get. I mean, you have guys that maybe played baseball, or dads that played baseball, or maybe got up there, but maybe completely different situation. Whereas me and him were almost mimicked the same way. I mean, he was able to stay up there a little bit longer and get a few more starts and stuff. But other than that, I mean, the whole process of getting there, he was always kind of in my head saying, hey, just keep plugging along. I mean, there's nothing else for you to do. So, you only get he always told me, you only get a little bit of time to really be able to do this as a career. So just grind your way through it and spend all your time trying to get there. And the ups and downs it'll all be worth it. So, having him in my head, being able to say, there's been a lot of up and down, a lot of downs during my minor league career, especially, and even up and down in the big leagues, and just being able to have that kind of like person that you can't really, send them off or anything like that and say, oh, you don't know what I'm going through, because he knew exactly what I was going through. So it was awesome to have him there.
You're also a Maryland guy. Did you grow up watching the Orioles? Were you an Orioles fan?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, I went, especially my dad threw BP in, I think 96, 95, 96 too, for the Orioles. So I was kind of, I didn't really remember him playing, but then I was also able to kind of be around Orioles and be around. He did all the fantasy camp stuff when I was younger, so I was like 9 or 10, being able to be around, Jim Palmer and Earl Weaver and Brooks Robinson and all those guys at fantasy camp, which was like, at the time I had no idea. I mean, I kind of knew, but at the same time I was like, oh, I know these guys and they know who I am. And but being able to kind of be in the clubhouse atmosphere, he wasn't playing then, but just kind of be around, and it was kind of just good to be able to experience all that. And then, I was a fan. I was at the last game that they were in they were in the playoff. I don't know when it was, 97, I think. And then, to eventually, 14 years later, be on the playoff team that got back there was kind of special to me. I mean, I was just sitting there in awe, being like, I was at the last playoff game as a fan. So it was funny.
Do you keep up with them now? Like, obviously a lot's happened since you played for them, but do you still keep up and down with them?
I think over the last 2 years since I stopped playing, or I guess, I don't know, it's been almost 3 years now, but it's been a little tougher. I've been trying to like stay away from maybe watching the day to day, and if they're on, I'll watch them. But a couple of guys, I played with Paul Fry. I think he's one of the only ones I played with that's still there. So for the first couple of years, I knew a couple of guys, so I could keep track of them and stuff. And but I've tried to kind of stay away and distance myself. Still hard in a way to kind of watch. And I think when a lot of the guys I played with start retiring, it'll be a little bit easier to kind of see guys and be like, oh, I don't know any of these guys. So it'll be a little easier watch. But for the most part, I do my best to kind of see it. It was nice seeing. I played with Kershaw and Kenley and all those guys with the Dodgers when I was with them. So it was good seeing them finally win one. They've been so close. So, it's hard to root for like a team like the Dodgers sometimes, but when you know guys, it's a little different.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were drafted by the Dodgers. When they traded you to the Orioles and the George Sherrill trade, like, what were your emotions? Were you just like overcome with joy knowing that, you're going back home?
I was. It was nice kind of being part of a trade, because a lot of times, I mean, you get traded and there's only a couple guys in the trade. It means like they kind of wanted you, which I was a little mad when I got drafted by the Dodgers a little bit, because I spent all these showcases with the Orioles and all these showcase teams in the fall, my whole high school career. I was expecting to get drafted. They knew me the best. So I was like, if anyone knows me, then they're going to draft me high, because they could just know what I could do at maybe a lower velocity. And they ended up not doing it. And I went to the Dodgers, but I kind of took it as a way to say, hey, I can make a name for myself. I'm not going to be kind of in my dad's shadow. I can kind of make my name for myself somewhere else and kind of be on the West Coast, which is like totally different, or at least be in that atmosphere out there. And then to be able to come back was just great. And I was able to be home, and I spent a lot of time in California and Michigan and all these places, and all the Orioles affiliates are like right in Baltimore or right near it. So it was nice kind of being around there and have my family and friends be able to come to games. So and then also have the opportunity to possibly play in the big leagues for them was obviously what I'd rather be there than with the Dodgers, honestly. So it ended up working out great.
You brought up something that's interesting. Going back to your time in high school, I was reading that you had I think it was your senior year, you struck out 20 of 21 guys. And, I think I was reading that there's like scouts there to watch somebody else pitch, and then you put on this clinic. And was it true? Was it true that after that, like, the Dodgers were the only team that was like continued to show interest in you at that point?
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually faced off against Brandon Irby,
Yeah.
who ended up getting drafted and by the Orioles, and it was like they were all kind of both there to see us. I mean, it was one of the things, we were one of two of the top pitchers in the MIA that season. So and we kind of faced off. It was the first game of the year, so I think it was like something like 50 scouts there to kind of see both of us. And I think it's very rare that two guys that are that talented in one state and face off against each other. So I just remember, I had a no hitter going into the last inning with like 2 outs, and I gave up a double to a guy that tomahawked it over his head. I swear, I was so mad after the game. I struck out 20 out of 21, and I was so pissed off that I didn't get the no hitter. And luckily, I got a no hitter later in the year. I think it was like 2 starts later, and ended up getting a perfect game too. I had a really good season or senior year, but it was, I mean, I couldn't believe I struck out 20 out of 21. I mean, I knew I struck out a lot, but I didn't realize it was that many. And to be able to do that kind of with that was great. But yeah, I ended up getting sick. I had like I had like something like a mono and a couple of things that kind of knocked my velocity down mid-season that year, which I was out about a week and a half, and I just wasn't able to get my velocity back up to where it really needed to be. I think I was throwing like 90, 91 during that game in the very beginning, and then I got sick, and I was only really hitting like 88, 89, and not that it's a huge difference, but when people are coming in to see you and you're not really hitting the numbers that you're being told about, it really doesn't matter what was going on with you sometimes. But the Dodgers were able to stay with me, and they ended up drafting me, and it all worked out.
This concept of, chip on your shoulder and overcoming adversity, like how much of that played into your early part of your career? Because like you said, you weren't a highly touted prospect. You only had limited interest coming out of high school. Even in the low levels of minor leagues, I was reading that, people still doubted you and didn't think you could do it. Like how much did like the chip on your shoulder aspect come into play at that time?
Every outing, coming out of high school, it was, you're one of the best guys, but also they don't really feel like you can do it at the next level. And that was basically the story of my career, was don't think that he can do it at the next level, or curveball's too slow, or doesn't throw hard enough. And when you just look at me pitch one time, yeah, sure. I mean, you could probably see it that way, where nothing was special. But when you kind of look over the grand scheme of things, on like 10 starts or so, and you see, 7 strikeouts, 8 strikeouts, 10 strikeouts, and you're like, what's going on? Why is this guy doing that? And I don't know why I was able to do it. I mean, I know I could pitch a little bit, but I had that sneaky fastball, and I was able to use it in the right way. And I had the slow curveball that worked for me. And every start, I was out there saying, I'm just going to prove people wrong. And, every level I went to, I think I struggled at first. If you looked at my stats, I'd go up for a half a season, and I'd kind of struggle right away. And the next season I'd go back and I'd perform well. And then, the next season I'd start and I'd go to AAA for the first time. And I think I had like a 6 ERA or 5 ERA. And the next season I went back and I put up good numbers. So, it was one of those things where I just kind of like had maybe a rough start, and I tried my best, but then I went back and really kind of fine tuned some things and got a little better. And I think the first real place that I didn't struggle when I went up the first time was the big leagues. I came up and I had like a 2 ERA in my first, what my rookie year or something. So, it worked out, but it was always tough with people kind of doubting you here and there. You want to hear it, but at the same time, you're like, can someone just kind of say that now I'm good enough maybe one time? And to be able to kind of start my rookie career, or like the first couple of games at least, and have some good outings and be able to show people, hey, I can do this. It didn't work out in the long run, consistently, but I think to start out, I showed them that I could handle my own a little bit.
Did you always have that kind of confidence and that kind of mentality? I was reading that, Buck Showalter had a great quote about you. He calls you fearless, and he's like, that's the kind of guy that I like, talking about you and just like your mentality. Was that something you've always had, or like, and did you know that was kind of one of the ways you were going to be able to get a leg up on some of these guys, was going out there with this, fearless mentality?
I think so. And my dad really helped with that, and that, I realized I had a good fastball, and a lot of guys ended up going away from their fastball. Whereas I kind of pitched a little backwards in that, where guys got ahead and then they went to their off speed, whereas I got ahead and I went to my fastball. So I kind of worked, because of what everyone else did, I kind of worked off of that in a way to where I was able to kind of get by. But I just kind of used some things to my advantage, and also just said I had confidence in myself. And a lot of times, I think there was my 2010 season where I didn't have any confidence at all. You got to have some success, I think, to have confidence. And I wasn't having really any success that year. So it was really tough that year to kind of come back and have a good year in 2011. But it's quiet confidence in a way, where some people don't really have that kind of bulldog mentality, to where I always wanted the ball. I always wanted to pitch. I kind of, you either have that or you don't. It's hard to kind of build that up if you don't really have that naturally, I think. And I just kind of was to myself. I wasn't a rah-rah guy, but I was just kind of just quiet confidence. And, to me, I didn't feel like I was like mean on the mound or anything, but I just remember some guys in high school, they made a comment to me when I ended up playing on the same team as them later. They're like, we hated you, just were so mean. I was like, what are you talking about? I just had the same demeanor all the time for the most part. But sometimes the things you kind of put off on to other people, it's actually just natural. I don't know. It's fun that can happen, but at the same time, it's just being myself. So
your 2012, your rookie year, I want to talk about that, but did that kind of almost end before it started? Like I was reading, was it 2011? They put you on the 40 man because they thought you were going to opt out. Like, was there like, how close were you to eventually, like, how close were you to like calling it? Like, all right, it's not going to work.
Well, it was 2012 when I almost opted out, and it
Okay.
was mainly because I had signed back. So at 2011, I ended up being a 7-year free agent, minor league free agent, and my agent actually wanted me to go somewhere else, and I was just kind of like I don't know, they know me here, I feel like I want to sign back with them, and it was the minor league deal, and I just felt like I wanted to give them one more chance to kind of just I kind of ended on a better note than I started AAA, and I just felt like I wanted to get it started. And he actually got in an opt-out clause when I signed back, which was it was kind of in that time when Buck was kind of the GM and they were kind of trying to find Dan at the time. So it was like a lull in the process of signing people. So I think I got an opt-out when I really shouldn't have gotten an opt-out normally. But my agent was great in being able to do that because they wanted to send me to the fall league. And so I went to the fall league. I performed pretty well and I signed back with them. I got an opt-out, and it was like June 1st, I think. And I ended up making AAA. I think Britton got hurt, so he wasn't starting the season. And I ended up getting in the rotation with, I think it was Tillman and Bergeson and Birkin and just guys that were all in the 40 man. And I was the only one that wasn't. So I had some work to do. And I ended up outperforming a lot of the guys. Tillman got called up early, but I ended up having a really good year. And it was time, and they didn't seem like, that was the year when we signed everybody. We signed Jamie Moyer, we signed Dontrell Willis, we signed Miguel Tejada. We were signing people off the street, and it was just kind of one of those things. I'm like, okay, we're doing well, I'm performing well, and it didn't feel like they were going to call me up. So I was like, at worst case, put me on the 40 man. Like, show me that you want to maybe keep me. Otherwise, I got to opt out. And so basically, it went to like the last hour almost where I actually opted out. They let it lapse, and then I said, to my agent, I said, I'm gone. Like, I'll go somewhere else. And I think we had kind of had that the Phillies were talking about possibly wanting me real bad. And so when I opted out, they had basically 48 hours to put me on the roster or I was gone. So it's like they kind of have like a little bit of time to kind of negotiate a little bit. And I think it was like a Sunday, and they basically said, if we put you on, you're going to start this game. And so it was a 1:00 game, and I'm riding the bike. It's like noon. And I'm like, are you putting me on the roster or not? And then finally I came in, I signed my stuff real quick, and then went out to pitch. And I had a terrible game, but I got put on the roster finally. And a month later they called me up, and I didn't get in the first time, but then the next time they called me up, and it kind of all went good from there. But it was just kind of like weird. I was like, what more? At that time I was pitching really well. I was like, what more do you want from me? But at the same time, it's just, they had a lot of decisions to make because they were performing really well. And it was just crazy time, but yeah, it almost didn't happen. Sometimes I forget about that, but it was really crazy.
Yeah, I've never heard that story before. That's really interesting. It was like a race against time to get you back before you had like 1 foot out the door. That's crazy.
I had my bags packed and possibly in my uniform to go start. So it was tough, but they were in a kind of a roster bind in a way to where I think they ended up having to put Britton on like the 60-day to kind of open up a spot. So they eventually didn't want to lose me, but it was also tough. They're performing well, so it was like they had to make the right move. So I don't blame them, but I wanted to be up there, so it was kind of one of those things. It worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, your major league debut came in relief against the Tigers. I love the video. Your dad's in the stands cheering you on. Like, how special was that for just like you and your entire family?
I barely remember it just because it's all a blur. I remember getting called up, and it was like a night game in Norfolk, and they basically, we can't get you here in time, so you got to drive. So I either had to drive and get in at like 4 a.m. or go to sleep and wake up at 3 or 4 a.m. and get there at noon. And I just felt better driving. So I remember I was really tired, but it was obviously really awesome to have everyone there. But you don't know if you're pitching or not. Ended up being a close game. I think it was only 2-0 when I got called in the game in the 8th inning. So I walked the first 2 guys I faced. My adrenaline was like through the roof, and I think I got like 2-1 on the next guy. And I was like, I cannot walk the bases loaded. Like if I walk the bases loaded, my career is probably over. And I just remember being like really nervous. And I think the guy ended up bunting a ball that was like 2 feet outside and for a sacrifice bunt. Thank God the game was close still, because they were still trying to bunt. And, you know, it kind of got me in a rhythm where I got my first out and got the next strikeout. And then I think I struck out Austin Jackson to end the inning, and kind of everything was good from there. But just kind of getting that cheer at the end where I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, I just walked the first 2 guys I faced, and here it goes again. You know, you're just thinking those bad thoughts, and then you kind of get back on track, and you kind of calm down a little bit. But it's tough when their adrenaline gets like that, and you've never been in that situation before, and you're throwing with major league balls, and it's facing big league hitters, and it's all, you know, it's all of the things that you've built it up to be, and then you got to go perform too. It's not an easy thing to do. So I was so glad my next outing, when it was my start, I was so much more calm and ready to go. So it was definitely a better experience. But man, there's nothing that beats it when you get that phone call from the bullpen that says you're going in and you're making your debut. It's hard to put into words.
Absolutely. So, you know, at that time, had you done a lot of stuff coming out of the bullpen? You know, starters are creatures of habit, I would think. Did you have to change your routine when you knew you were coming in relief?
So fortunately, I actually had some time down in the minors for the first time. We signed Jamie Moyer. Like, I got put on the 40-man, and we signed Jamie Moyer like a week and a half later. And they basically told me that he was taking my place in the rotation, which I was not happy about, but also understood. Fortunately, I was able to kind of piggyback Britton in that I knew I was kind of going to pitch at a certain time. So it was kind of being in the bullpen, but not really. You know, they were like, hey, you're going to start in the 4th inning. And so I was able to kind of do my routine out in the bullpen a little bit. But once I got to the big leagues, you know, I'd never really experienced that. How much do I warm up? You know, what do I do before the game? So I really relied on guys like Jim Johnson and Darren O'Day and, you know, Troy Patton and guys like that when I came up, because I had no idea. You know, I was the guy that threw 30 to 40 pitches in the bullpen and then was ready to go. So in the big leagues, when they say get hot, you have like sometimes 7 to 10 pitches in the bullpen, and then you have 7 to 10 pitches out, you know, or 7 pitches when you get out to the field. So it's kind of a whole different game, and I had to kind of learn on the fly a little bit. But what better time to do it when you're in a pennant race, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was going back. I read something Darren O'Day said about starters going to the bullpen. He said the bullpen's where starters go to die. Like, do you agree with that? You know, you obviously had a lot of success coming out of the bullpen and starting. So like, you've been on both sides. Like, is that true most often than not when starters go to the bullpen?
It's tough to say. I think it wears on you. I think you can do it maybe a short period of time. But over the course of my career, I was always kind of the guy when I got called up. I was kind of like maybe spot start guy or long relief guy or 1-inning guy. I kind of did a little bit of everything. And when you're kind of in that position, I kind of made it work my rookie year. I mean, I think my rookie year, I could do it. I don't know how, but you put me in any situation, I ended up performing. But over the course of my career, the next couple of years, I couldn't get consistent. I couldn't get that routine back, and I had some injuries that kind of failed me a little bit at the wrong times. But I think that maybe part of it was because of the inconsistency. You know, you go start, you know, for 2 games, then you get called up and you get thrown in the bullpen, and then you're in the bullpen kind of trying to do that routine. Then when you get sent down, you're starting again, and you can't really ever get into a rhythm. And that is tough to do, and some guys can do it really well. I mean, there's some guys that do it and they make a living out of it, and that's really impressive. But I think at some point, when maybe what Darren meant by that is that sometimes when you go in the bullpen and you perform, then you're going to maybe stay in the bullpen a lot of times, because, you know, take a guy like Britton who, you know, you're like, hey, can I take Britton, what he's doing now, and make that into a starter? It's like, well, do you really want to set up? So you might not have that chance to start anymore if you end up performing well. Or you go to the bullpen and you do crappy, and then you get sent down, and next time you get called up, you're bouncing around all the time, and then you just don't get that consistent time or that, you know, good feeling of they're feeling confident to start you now that you haven't performed well in the bullpen. So I can understand what he kind of means by that in a bunch of different ways. So it's tough.
Yeah, you know, it's just weird because they never really talk about the fact that, you know, starters, they have to get like their routine. You have a bunch of things you have to do beforehand. And, you know, you're right. Cause like when you don't have a set time that you're going in, like, did you ever find yourself having trouble, like, you know, bringing your self back down to center, like trying to calm down? Like, did the nerves, was that hard to control them early on?
I think starting and relieving both have their benefits in different ways. And I kind of like the feeling of that instant adrenaline, because I felt my problem as a starter was my first inning, my adrenaline was kind of low. And I felt like it was tough to you spend all day, you're starting, and you kind of have to really build yourself up and kind of get pumped. And I was kind of slow and methodical in how I did things and just kind of like went along my day. And sometimes after that, it's really kind of hard to say, okay, now it's time. And I did my best with it, obviously, over the course of my career, but there's nothing like being in the bullpen, knowing that you're kind of one of the guys that could get, picked today, or, you're one of the guys that's hot. And then that phone rings and it's just like instant adrenaline of saying, hey, you're up, and you go, and there's nothing that really can replace that, or kind of, there's nothing starter wise that you even ever get that feeling. So I liked it in that way, but at the same time, yeah, it's you have a routine as a starter, and then when you're kind of bouncing around trying to do both, it's really tough to do. You have like a starter routine and a reliever routine, and the reliever is you basically just do the same thing every day, which is easy. And it's always fun going to the ballpark and knowing that you possibly could play. As a starter, sometimes when you're going to the ballpark and you have 4 days where you're going there and you're like, well, I'm going to get my stuff in before the game, and then I'm going to be kind of bored, and then as much as you're excited watching baseball, it's kind of like, all right, well, I have 4 days until I get to play again. And then, you hope to go long into that game and not have a 2-inning start. So, you have that in your mind. But as a reliever, you get to go to the field every day knowing that you could get in. That's also kind of fun.
When you came up for your first spot start, your first win in August, at what point did somebody tell you that was 23 years to the day that your dad got his first win for the Orioles?
I think we were listening to it on the radio as my dad picked me up that day from Norfolk, or not from Norfolk. We were actually in Atlanta. And so I flew from Atlanta and got picked up that morning. He took me from the airport to the ballpark. And it was like, I think it was on the radio, and I think he had talked about it with somebody. So I think he maybe mentioned it. I don't remember too much from that morning or drive. It was kind of, you're all focused and nervous and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was just crazy that even was possible, and that worked out. And that the similarities of the years and how, the why not year, and then kind of compared to the 2012 year in a way. And then, him getting called up down the stretch, and then me getting called up. And then eventually that kind of working out to where I pitched well down the stretch and got some more spot starts and kind of helped. And just the way that all worked out was kind of cool. But the fact that we were able to get our first wins on the same day, for the same team, I don't know what kind of record that is, but I can't imagine that's ever happened before with a father and son. So, I mean, I just think it's pretty cool that we're able to share that. And every time August 8th comes around, it's kind of like one of those things where we can always just kind of send a text or kind of watch video of it at some point. It's kind of special.
Were you upset that, Manny Machado didn't make his debut then? I think he made his debut the next day. Like, did you think like
I got sent down for him.
Oh, wait, was that the corresponding move?
Yeah, it was me.
I didn't know that. I'm sorry, but hey,
it
worked out
all
well.
Good. I mean, yeah, I got called up 4 days later, so it wasn't a huge deal. They waited till the next day to kind of do it, and I knew someone was going down. I knew it was probably going to be me. I'd already experienced that twice, and it's part of it. And that's kind of was my career in general. I was kind of the guy that I did my job for the most part, and at least that year. And I got sent down. And luckily after that, I think Troy Patton got hurt. And 4 days later, I was able to come up and I spent some time in the bullpen before my next start. But yeah, I mean, I guess in a way I would have loved to kind of stay up there and enjoy the next however many days and kind of like being up there and having that start that I had, kind of being able to see Manny and experience that, his debut.
Yeah.
But at the same time, hey, moves got to happen. So they did the right thing. And then 4 days later, I was able to get back up there anyway. So it wasn't a big deal.
Was it hard to try to not get discouraged when you kept getting sent up and down? Because I remember you were kind of like the taxi squad guy. It was up, down, up, down. It was like 4 or 5 times. Like, like you've said, you went out there, you did all you could, you got your win, and then you went right back down. Was that hard to not get discouraged at that point?
It's definitely hard. I mean, a lot of guys experienced that over that year and the next year. They did that a lot. And I mean, they did it even with guys like Gosman, the next year or 2 years later, whenever it was, when he was kind of experiencing that same thing. And it's hard to get in a groove, and it's hard to be mentally like confident sometimes. And in that every time you're you do your job as a long reliever, especially with the outings that we would have from some of our starters. And it's not easy to pitch in the AL East, especially as some of them, we had a lot of fly ball pitchers at times, and they'd go 2 innings, and then all of a sudden you have to go in and eat up 3 or 4 innings sometimes, or anyone, not just me, and other guys had to experience it, where you go in, you do your job, and now you're useless to them in a way for the next couple games. But they also have to prepare for, the teams we were facing, the Blue Jays and the Yankees at the time, and Boston, I mean, they were pretty good. So when you're facing teams like that in a ballpark like ours, you got to kind of be ready for that to happen again, where the next starter might not go 2 or 3. And do you have a guy that can go long for them? And unfortunately, we got caught in that little bubble in a way, to where it's like, we did our job, but we also, the team has to be ready for it to happen again the next day, because we really didn't have like those stud starters in a way that we were like, hey, he's going 7 no matter what. And it was just kind of the way it was. It is, we dealt with it, but it was tough kind of pitching and kind of looking over your shoulder after the game, being like, I want to enjoy my time here, but at the same time, I think that if there's a move, it's probably going to be me. And it kind of was unfortunate in that, I don't want to say I didn't enjoy my time in the big leagues. It's hard not to. But I wish I was able to maybe experience more time, like all at once. And part of that was my fault, in that I didn't perform as well as I could have at some point. But at the same time, it's like, I felt like, hey, maybe I've done some things that allowed me to kind of stay here a little longer. And luckily, my rookie year, at least, after I got called up that one time, I was able to stay up the rest of the year. So it was a little easier to kind of enjoy that year. But the rest of the years, it was tougher to do that.
You brought up the extended time you had in 2012. That 2012 Orioles team was just special. Like, that's one of my favorite Orioles teams. Like, could you feel it in the clubhouse? Like, did you know that like this group of guys had what it takes to get back to the playoffs?
Yeah, and it's kind of cool, because we experienced a lot of guys that helped us out from AAA, and being able to be around those guys, so Nate McLeod and Lou Ford, and guys like that, and all the pitchers that went up. And we were kind of experiencing this thing in AAA, where I think we set the AAA record, how many moves we made, but also the big leagues. I mean, all those guys that helped out in some way, and Miguel Gonzalez being there, and then going up there and pitching in big games down the stretch, and pitching in Yankee Stadium in the playoffs, and have Jim Tomy come to the clubhouse, and me being next to him in New York in the playoffs, just talking to him and being like, what is going on right now? Why am I around all these different people that weren't around? It was just kind of special. We just kind of said, hey, they don't believe that we can do it. They're always waiting for it to, for us to fall apart, and for it to say, they can't do it, the run differential and all that stuff that they were talking about, and the extra inning games. And we just said, hey, what? We can do it. We have the team to do it. We have the talent to do it. And we were all just kind of enjoying playing the game. And for me personally, I think I played 7 or 8 years in the minors, and I don't think we had a winning season my whole career. And all of a sudden, my first time in the big leagues, being able to celebrate that way, and be able to be on a team like that. And anytime in the minors, sometimes you're on a winning team, and it's kind of like, it doesn't really mean anything. And when you're doing it in the big leagues, you're like, this is literally what it's all about. So it was a lot of fun. I think a lot of the guys had a lot of fun.
Jim Tomey was my favorite part of that. Just the fact that they traded for him halfway through. Do you have like any good Jim Tomey stories? You mentioned, sitting in Yankee Stadium talking to him. I feel like that guy just is like the nicest human ever.
He really is. And honestly, I don't remember much of it. And he has a way of speaking. And I think people have done it before, and anyone that does like an impersonation of him is like spot on. And that, yeah, he is the nicest guy. And one of the things just I'll always remember, in that I didn't have many conversations with him, but for some reason, I wasn't on the roster, the playoff roster for the game, but I was obviously in the dugout with everybody during that series in Yankee Stadium. And for some reason, he just sat next to me. And during that one game, I think it was the extra inning game, he was DHing at some point. And here I am, some rookie, and he's just having a conversation with me pretty much the whole game. And usually guys get up and they, go sit somewhere else throughout the game. But I just sat in the same spot, and then he'd come back and sit down, and I don't know, I was just talking to him. And for, afterwards, I really thought about it, like, wow, that is unbelievable that I got to experience all that in my rookie year at the same time. And there's very few guys where you get kind of like that feeling of like, I can't believe I'm talking to him. But, sitting back looking at him, like, wow, I literally talked to Jim Tomey for a whole game, like, I mean, it's one thing to have it happen the course of the whole season, but he wasn't there that long. So it's just cool to be able to experience that and kind of have those memories. But yeah, really, really nice guy. And it was a crazy year.
Absolutely. Like, and obviously Buck Showalter, he was the man at that time. Like, what made Buck like such a great manager if you had to boil him down to a couple things?
I think really I think he managed the bullpen pretty well. I think he got a lot of credit for that, and that we always had some new guy, and he was always trying to do the right thing for a lot of players. And I think that was kind of one of the things he'd go around. He always felt like he was like this stern, manager, and that he didn't really have a personality, and he'd walk around before the game and then just kind of crack these jokes and always thinking of different things, and just one of those things where you're like, he's always thinking of something, trying to think of some strategy to use this one thing or this one, his mind was always working, but he always knew kind of what buttons to push, and he did a good job with those teams.
I love it. All right, let's do some rapid fire, then I'll let you run. I appreciate your time. Who is the funniest Oriole you played with?
Oof, I would probably say TJ McFarland's up there. TJ, he's a character, that's for sure.
Who were you closest with on that 2012 Orioles team?
The 2012 team, probably Britton and Tillman. Britton, Tillman, and Gonzo, in a way. I mean, they were the guys that were in AAA. So, when you spend all that time together and then you're going through all the same stuff in the up and down, you kind of hang with those guys more.
Do you still keep up with Tillman? I haven't heard anything about him since he was in Texas for a little bit, and it just vanished, I think.
Yeah, I haven't heard much from him. I kept in touch with some of the guys. I still keep in touch with TJ and some Mike Wright, some guys that were a little bit after, and Adam Jones I'll talk to here and there. He's always kind of messaging me out of nowhere sometimes, just making sure. I think his kids go to St. Paul's, or they did go to St. Paul's when they were in there, so he's always kind of giving me some crap for that. Yeah, it's tough kind of keeping in touch with some guys throughout the years, just because a guy like TJ, we were really close when he was there, and then when they go to different teams, you're still close, but then you don't really see him. And then I think we missed each other. He was kind of hurt when I was up with the Mariners in 2016 and came to play the Orioles. So it was like we haven't really seen him. Went to his wedding, but at the same time, you're trying to see all these guys and they're in different places playing. It's tough to keep track, and it's easy to kind of like let go. And I try to keep track of so many people and try and keep in touch on a text message here and there, but it's tough doing everybody, especially when you play for so many teams and for a longer period of time. You just lose track sometimes. But I'm sure a text message here, all of a sudden it's like nothing happened. You're back in the clubhouse again. So that's the good part about it.
Yeah. So who was your favorite catcher you worked with?
Oh, that's tough. I would say like Wieters was good to me, but I think. Man, so I mean, Caleb was good when he got up there in AAA. That's tough. I think Mike Zunino, honestly, over the course of my career, when I was with him with the Mariners, just being able to frame pitches, throw guys out. I think he was one of the better guys. I mean, Wieters was always good at throwing guys out, but just being able to steal that bottom strike for me, I think he was really able to kind of make some pitches that were balls, strikes, and I needed every bit of that I could get. So being able to have him there for the short period of time I played with him, he was pretty good defensively, and yeah. But Wieters, my rookie year, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better catcher to have throwing guys out. I think he threw out 3 guys in one game for me, stealing. So that was always nice. It was a full inning, basically, right there.
Does a good catcher really make, like, how much of a difference does like an average to a good catcher make? Like, can you tell with like certain guys that like, do they elevate your game?
For sure. 100%. I mean, when you're on the same page with the catcher, especially, I mean, some guys you're just never on the same page with. So if a guy has a good feeling for what you're throwing that day and you don't have to shake off, and you're confident that after like the first 2 innings, you're like, everything he's putting down is something that I want to throw. That's a good sign. It's just good rhythm to have. And if you have a guy that's constantly putting down something that you don't want to throw and you have to shake to it, one it throws off your rhythm, and then you don't trust what he's seeing. But he's like, okay, I know what I want to throw, and I know that I'm feeling this way, and he's seeing something else or wanting to do something different. And I don't know why we're not getting on the same page. So then he might eventually throw something that you're putting down or that you kind of want to throw, and you're like, all right, I don't know if I want to throw that now because I don't trust them. So you get kind of that way sometimes. Or if a guy's not that great defensively, you may shy away from throwing a certain pitch in a certain situation. So which it might be the right pitch. So it's really important to have a guy that knows you and that also can do what is his job defensively in blocking a ball or throwing a guy out. And also as a pitcher, you got to do your job to give them all the time in the world to be able to throw the guys out. So as long as you're on the same page, you get a good groove with a catcher, which for the most part, I had a lot of good catchers throughout my career. So I was lucky in that way.
Absolutely. Did you have a favorite pregame meal?
I had a hard time eating before games. So it was really tough because my nerves would get to me. And I just really, I think, unfortunately, I think in the big leagues, I think they had like Cheerios or something always. So I tried to like at least get down some cereal, which wasn't really the most nutritious thing. But I think for a while in the minors, I tried to do the same routine every time. I think lower minors at least. And I went to Chick-fil-A and got like a Caesar wrap, which was like, thought I was being healthy. But I stopped doing that because I didn't want to be locked into feeling like I needed to eat the same thing every time, because then you start thinking if you didn't get that meal, then am I going to perform well? And so I stopped doing that, the whole doing the same thing every time, because if you step on the line one time and then, okay, you're gonna have a bad inning the next, it's like that mental side of the game where it's like I didn't want to give myself where I needed to eat this certain special thing, otherwise I wouldn't be where I needed to be. So I stopped doing that a little bit. That was a smart move on my end because of Chick-fil-A. So
it makes you wonder how Jim Palmer ate all those pancakes all those years.
Hey, I mean, some guys are able to do it. And some, especially you get to a certain point, people make sure they have it for you. So I think that may have been more the case where it's like, hey, we need to get him his stuff, and then that's a little easier to do. But it's all on what you need to do. Some guys need that mental side where it's like they feel a little bit more confident when they have that certain thing. And I just got to a point where I just didn't want to have that stress of, I didn't eat this, so I'm going to perform bad today. So I think that was the smart move.
Post-retirement, what's like your favorite thing you've done since you've called it quits?
Tough. Just enjoying the summer, being able to go to the beach in the summer, being able to enjoy being with my wife and my family during certain holidays. You miss a lot when you're playing. So just simple stuff and nothing crazy. Just being able to maybe have the 4th of July to do something, instead of playing the game, or Mother's Day, or every day that a holiday pops up on, it's being able to just enjoy time with friends at the beach. I mean, that's just simple stuff that people maybe got to do. And I maybe missed out on a little bit throughout my career, at least with, you're able to do some things, but I got to play in the big league, so I can't complain. But just simple things like that, to where I really enjoyed just saying, hey, I didn't get to do this for a really long time. And now I'm able to kind of do this again, and then maybe experience some things that I didn't really get to experience.
All right. Last one. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Basically, if you want something, just go get it. Don't let anyone else say you can't do it. Don't let anyone kind of ruin any small like victories. I think I was just kind of learning how to just say, hey, that might not be a big deal to you, but that's a small victory for me, and then I'm going to take that and build on it. And there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of negative activities out there and negative people out there that want to just tear you down for no reason. And some of them are just doing their jobs and just describing maybe how they view you as a player or as a person. But I think the best thing that you can do is just say, hey, I'm going to take my small victories. I'm going to kind of build myself up when I need to. And then I'm just going to keep attacking and keep proving people wrong. And I think that, if people can build on that and just take all the positives that they can, you just build a small positive into a small positive. And, something small for someone else might be something huge for someone, especially at a younger age. So and that's kind of one of the things that I try to keep positive energy going and try not to think too negatively. There's too much of that around. Absolutely.
Dude, this has been awesome. Where can people find your optimal baseball performance stuff if they want to get a hold of you that way?
So you can just go to optimalbaseball.com and we'll have, right now it's just a Facebook page, but we're getting that website up. So all the information's there, website, or email, phone number, all that good stuff. So I'll be there, but I appreciate you for having me on.